So I've been refraining from making an impressions video about Total War Warhammer because I don't know anything about the lore, and that's mostly what other YouTubers were talking about. The recent video on the siege of Altdorf got me thinking about the vampire counts and what I'd like to call the zombie conundrum. And I think this is a problem that will face most vampire counts players, at least in multiplayer. Keep in mind, for those of you who don't know about my channel, I mainly focus on multiplayer, so keep everything that I talk about in the context of custom battles, multiplayer battles, and stuff like that. Not really on campaign. Although this mechanic, I think, will obviously translate a bit into your campaign battles, but in general, playing against the AI, you don't really need to use too much of strategy or think too much about units as much as you do in multiplayer. And this is basically going to be talking about a certain unit which you probably know, the zombies in the vampire counts. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about them. The vampire counts have no missiles, apparently. I mean, this is from what I know. Instead, they rely on zombies to be their meat shield and fell bats to quickly kill off the enemy skirmishers. But I don't think it's that easy for two reasons. One, zombies are really slow. Slower than even the more heavily armored and super powerful grave guard units of the VCs. And number two, fell bats are very easily killed. At least this is what I've gathered from the trailers that they've put out so far. Now, when I would face up against a vampire counts army, there are two things that I would make sure of. That I have a bunch of skirmishers and that I have a bunch of cavalry. In fact, it would play out pretty similar to a Parthia versus Boii match in Total War Rome 2. Parthia having great archers and cavalry, and the Boii vampires having excellent infantry and cavalry but shit skirmishers. One key difference though. Levy Freemen seem like a far better unit than the zombies. Yes, MLG Levy Freemen better than zombies confirmed. One, the Levy Freemen are light units. They are light in mass, meaning that they are the quickest infantry in the Boii army or in any barbarian army. Two, they can throw basically 240 javelins at enemies over the course of a match. Usually it's just 120. They get access to 2 precursor javelin volleys. Before they charge into an enemy, they all 120 of them usually will just toss one of their javelins, and each of these javelins has like 29 weapon damage. Basically, it's butt slaughters any enemy unit very easily, especially cavalry. Now, the zombies don't have any javelins, and instead of being light, they're super slow, making it a more fair comparison to see the zombies against militia hoplites. So let's compare these two. Militia hoplites are very heavy units, making them as slow as the rest of the Greek army. And they don't throw any precursor javelins. They're shit. You don't see them in any good Greek roster or Greek army. Not only are they more expensive than the Levy Freemen, but the heavy mass is a liability, and they're slow to rush in front of armies and eat arrows, and they're slow to rush in and support cavalry engagements. The thing is, the Greek factions don't need meat shield units, because the Greek factions have the best skirmishers in the game, not the vampire counts. So that leaves the vampire counts in an awkward position. Not only do they have 0 skirmishers, but they also seemingly don't have a great meat shield unit, at least one that's not as strong as the Levy Freemen. And keep in mind, the Levy Freemen for barbarian factions is almost a must-have, because they perform such a crucial role that it makes up for the lack of variety and the lack of different tools that the barbarians have. So yeah, it leaves the vampire counts in an awkward position, and I'm sorry, but I have to compare this again, the vampire counts, with another faction. They seem to be now most similar to the Alanis in Total War Attila. Not the original Alanis, but the new Alanis after the patch. No missile infantry for either of these factions, but the Alanis do have horse archers. Now, I don't know if the vampire counts have anything like this, or I'm not sure if any faction in Total War Warhammer has horse archers or javelin cavalry or something, but even disregarding that, the Alanis do have very strong, cheap melee infantry who can sort of double up as meat shields. You don't need a critical, absolute 100% tank of a meat shield unit like the Levy Freemen for the Alanis, because the Alanis have horse archers and they themselves are a great tool for drawing away enemy arrow fire and thus putting less attention onto your main army. And it doesn't look like the vampire counts have them either. Now, maybe an option could be to use the fellbats almost like a horse archer type of unit. Well, the fellbats don't fire; they don't shoot their guano onto enemy units down on the ground. Although that would be particularly spectacular. But you could maybe use them sort of like how you use horse archers in Total War Rome 2. You move them up really early on in the game, put them like basically try and surround your opponent with 3 or 4 of those fellbats along, the east and west flanks and the south, basically behind his army. But the problem is, the reason why surrounding with horse archers works in Total War Rome 2 and Total War Attila is because horse archers are a fucking nuisance. As they're, on either flank, they're going to keep firing. You always have to think about them firing their heavy shot onto your cavalry and then the cavalry dies. The fellbats don't seem to have something like that. They don't seem to have that nuisance factor. They are incredibly quick, but I wouldn't, charge them straight into a missile infantry line, especially considering that usually units that are really quick are also very easy to die or are very easily killed. So yeah, it might be an option using fellbats as a surround type of unit, but I don't think it'll happen. I think fellbats more than likely will be used as a mid to late game unit. Keep them safe in the initial bits, and depending on how expensive they are, they would either be used really early game or they'd be used most likely mid to late game. But yeah, all of that brings us to our conundrum, the zombie conundrum. You'd want to put, as the vampire counts, you'd want to put your zombies way up in front of your of your main line so that they eat arrows and they keep the rest of your men safe. But doing that is counterintuitive, as it would simply take one cavalry charge to knock down the unsupported zombies and basically make them useless. Again, this is keeping in mind that I'm assuming that Total War Warhammer's cavalry mechanics will play, it's more similar to Attila than to Total War Rome 2. But even in Total War Rome 2, one cavalry charge onto an unsupported meat shield unit means the end of that meat shield unit, and I think that's going to stay the same in Total War Warhammer. So you can't really put them all the way up in front of the rest of your army. Now you can't keep them close to your army because not only are they slower than your more expensive and your more fragile vampire counts infantry units, so they actually won't move up in front of them to block enemy missiles. But what are you really using them for if you're not going to put them up in the front of your army? They're basically useless. They don't have anything going on for them. They have really terrible swords. They don't have any melee attack. Stuff like that. They have to be used up in front, essentially. At least they've been designed to be used up in front. Fellbats and cavalry may be used in conjunction with zombies, and that could sound like a good idea. But because of the ridiculously large speed differential between cavalry and zombies and fellbats and zombies, making sure these two units stay close together is going to be a pain in the ass. And keep in mind, both cavalry and I believe fellbats as well are very vulnerable to missiles. At least I think they are. So the point that I want to make is that I think the zombies will be a very crucial component of a vampire count army. You might be wondering why I'm saying this after basically shitting on the zombies the entire time. But because the vampire count roster has so many limitations because of their lack of missile infantry, and the fact that zombies themselves seem to have so many limitations compared to a good meat shield unit, there will be a lot of frustration and disappointment from a lot of players when playing the vampire counts initially against any other good player. But I think good players, that is, players who are good at playing the vampire counts, will be able to utterly destroy their opponents, I think, because the rest of the vampire counts roster is incredibly strong, as I'm sure you guys know. The magic that's available to the heroes and stuff, and they have so many cool units, the cudgel infantry, scythe infantry, they seem to be really, really good. But that's the thing. All of these units will get slaughtered by enemy missiles and cavalry unless the zombies are used properly. So that's the conundrum. How do you use a really shitty meat shield unit? That's my first Warhammer impressions, Total War Warhammer impressions video, you guys. Let me know if you want to see more. Let me know if you want to see any topics that you'd want to see me discuss specifically. And let me know what you think about the zombie conundrum. Alright guys, until next time, peace.